B2B marketing teams rely on eMarketer Media Solutions to elevate their thought leadership and build meaningful relationships through exclusive webinars, guides, infographics, and more, if you can believe it. Visit eMarketer.com/advertise to learn more about our proven approach.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Behind the Numbers Around the World, an eMarketer podcast. It's Monday, August the 26th. I'm your host, Bill Fisher, and it's my pleasure, as it always is, to welcome you all to Around the World. And this month, we're talking about Summer Olympic broadcast rights. Who owns them, and are they worth it? Welcome, folks, to a Behind the Numbers show that takes you around the world, looking at what various countries are doing in the worlds of commerce, media, and advertising. Each month, we have our 3 in 3 global news recap. Then we have the round table, where my guests and I have an open discussion about the main theme for today's show. And then we finish it all off with my recap stats quiz, all related to the topic at hand again. This month, we will be asking, who were the big broadcaster winners from this year's Summer Olympics?
There's a broadcast coalition that shares the rights. So there's wall-to-wall coverage of the Olympics pretty much at every hour of the day on 3 separate channels.
Have changing viewing habits helped?
I think even with streaming, a lot of people still prefer to watch it on television. It's sort of like seen as a communal experience, right?
And has the door been opened to greater advertising potential?
I think that streaming services need to be careful not to overload their audiences with advertising, especially if, like in the UK, they've been used to having no adverts during their sporting events.
Okay, I have 3 experts to help me out with today's show. Let's get them involved. First up, we have our Canada analyst. It is Paul Briggs, of course. Hello, Paul.
Hey, Bill. Great to be here.
Great to have you on the show. Next, he's our researcher for Asia Pacific. It is Manchung Chung. Hello, Manchung.
Hello, everyone.
And finally, she's our UK and Western Europe retail expert. It's Karina Perkins. Hey, Karina.
Hi, Bill. Thanks for having me back.
Great to have all of you on the show today. Okay, before we get into this episode proper, let me introduce you first to this month's Culture Shock. It's a loose culture shock this week. I'm kind of talking about sports and investment, but it's a story, really. The US is incredibly good at many sports because there's a lot of investment in a lot of sports in the US. But I want to tell you the story of Eric Moussambani. Does that ring a bell with anybody? Anyone heard of him? He is from Equatorial Guinea. He turned up to Olympic trials in 2000, the Sydney Olympics. It was part of a wildcard initiative that the International Olympics Committee, the IOC, implemented to try and get people involved in sports who otherwise wouldn't have the chance to get involved. And so Equatorial Guinea were given a load of wildcard entries. Eric entered the 100-metre freestyle swimming event. There were no other entrants from Equatorial Guinea, so he immediately got straight on the plane to Sydney. Thing is, he couldn't really swim. There were no 50-metre pools in Equatorial Guinea, so he'd had to learn to swim in a lake just a few months prior. In his qualifying heat in Sydney, the 2 other swimmers in his heat false started, so Eric swam unopposed. He'd actually thought he'd entered the 50 metres, so to have to do 2 laps of this pool was rather daunting. He barely made it. People thought he was going to drown, but he did make it. It took twice the time of the other qualifiers. It was the slowest ever qualifying time in Olympic history, but his effort didn't go unnoticed. He was dubbed Eric the Eel. You may have heard that name, maybe. He went home a hero. And then the investment game. 2 50-metre pools were built in Equatorial Guinea. Eric was able to train properly. He halved his personal best. Unfortunately, there was a visa cock-up, prevented him from competing at Athens 4 years later. But his PB of 52.18 seconds would have placed him 52nd in the world. So it's amazing what a bit of investment can do, isn't it? I really love that story. I think it's brilliant.
I love that story. It reminds me of a stat which I saw post-Olympics, which said that after watching the Olympics this year, more than 1 in 4 Britons thought that they could probably become an Olympic-level athlete in at least one of the sports.
I don't believe that, but it's good that they think it. Anyway, let's get into our new segment now. Something that we call 3 in 3. I have 3 interesting and related news stories. I'm going to introduce in turn 1 story to 1 guest. They're going to give me their take. Between the 2 of us, we're going to do it all in a minute. So 3 stories in 3 minutes. The timer is set. Let's go. Story 1 is for Karina, and it's a gold medal for Discovery Plus in the UK. Discovery Plus became the UK's fastest growing paid streaming service earlier this month, reported The Guardian. This was thanks to its securing of broadcast rights for the Olympics across Europe. The BBC still carried some limited coverage in the UK, but a subscription to Discovery was required if you wanted access to everything. Karina, will this cement Discovery's place in the UK's streaming landscape?
I think so. I mean, it's definitely going to help. Discovery was actually doing quite well ahead of the Olympics. So it was, alongside Apple Plus, the fastest growing paid video on demand service in the UK in the first 6 months of 2024. That's according to Kantar's latest entertainment on demand report, which The Guardian cited. And since then, it has accelerated to become the fastest growing video on demand service. Obviously, the Olympics has given it a massive boost in subscription. I think there was one day, the Saturday, the 27th of July, was Warner Bros. Discovery's highest number of new paid streaming subscribers ever on a single day in Europe. There is, of course, the higher churn rate associated with households who sign up for specific content, which is going to have to navigate. I think it's been quite clever there because it's offered a $3.99 deal. So a standard subscription is $6.99 a month, but it offered as part of the Olympics a $3.99 a month deal until the end of 2024. So I imagine what it's hoping is that it'll get some people on there for the Olympics and they'll then stay at a relatively low cost and get hooked on some of its other content. Interestingly, Kantar didn't just attribute its performance to the Olympics. It also said that it is rating really highly on its ad experience, with viewers really appreciating the balance in the number of ads it's showing and the length of ad breaks. So I don't think the Olympics is going to be the end of its growth. I think it's definitely really established itself now in the UK.
Very good. Thanks for that, Karina. That was our first story. Story 2 is for Paul, and this is about sports viewing on a whole different level. The Canadian women's soccer team was embroiled in a spying controversy in Paris when it was revealed that senior members of the coaching staff had been flying drones over rivals' training sessions to gain intel. The team was docked points, while the head coach and 2 members of her staff were given bans. Paul, tech and sports, usually good bedfellows, but not in this instance. What's your take?
My take is that it's a bit of a black eye for the Canadian Olympic team. I think first of all, it's cheating, unethical, and secondly, it was incredibly ill-conceived. Thinking that you can fly a drone over in airspace above an Olympic city during the Olympics, I'm surprised that thing wasn't blown out of the sky by security forces. So it's just a bad look all around.
Indeed, they actually managed to qualify though, didn't they? Even with the points being docked.
That's right. They were 3-0 in the preliminary rounds, which got them 3 points. So they were docked 6, and they got 3 points in total, and that got them through to face, I think it was France, and I think they lost in the quarters.
Very good. Thanks, Paul. That was story 2. And story 3 is for Man Chung. And we're looking at future Olympics. Before the Paris Games even kicked off, the IOC announced that it had awarded broadcast rights in Central and Southeast Asia for the Games from 2026 through to 2032 to Infront Sports and Media. The company had already held the rights for Sub-Saharan Africa. Man Chung, broadcast rights are a big deal in Asia. How lucrative could this be for Infront?
Well, it is unprecedented and lucrative, potentially worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The deal covers all traditional and digital media platforms across 22 countries and territory in Southeast Asia and Central Asia, which have a combined population of nearly 1 billion. So it's a big deal. In general, these are also fast-growing economies with growing middle class and have an expanding appetite for all things sports. And having exclusive rights across all media platforms also give Infront the leverage to negotiate favorable distribution deals. We're talking about like revenue from advertising, from sponsorship and subscription as well. Like you said, they also held the right for Sub-Saharan Africa. So there could be something at play in terms of just like a cross-country or cross-region marketing product that they could sell to multinational corporations or even regional players like Huawei, Xiaomi, BYD Auto, and other local brands as well. And also, I want to know one thing is that Infront Sports and Media, I believe it's a Swiss company, but it's also a subsidiary of Chinese conglomerate Wanda. So that's sort of like a big win for the Chinese sports broadcasting industry as well.
Very good. Thanks, Man Chung. And that wraps up our 3 in 3 for this month. And now it's time for the main part of the show, what we're calling now the Round Table. This is where we dig a little bit deeper into today's topic. And Of course, we're looking back at what was a terrific Olympic Games in Paris, a Summer Olympics. And we're going to concentrate on the broadcasting and the viewing stats for the Games. And we'll have a little look at advertising as well. The guys have already mentioned that a couple of times. So let's start with broadcast rights, a fairly divisive topic. We've heard about what's coming up in Asia. Interesting to hear what was going on with Discovery. So, I mean, I guess the first question is, who have been the big winners out of this year's Olympic Games? Paul, we haven't heard about Canada yet. Look, what's gone on in your territory?
Yeah, I think the big winners are viewers. In Canada, there's a broadcast coalition that shares the rights. So there's wall-to-wall coverage of the Olympics pretty much at every hour of the day on 3 separate channels, 2 cable channels, the Sports Network, Sportsnet, and TSN. But then the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, has wall-to-wall coverage as well. So there's a ton of content available on linear television. There's a ton of ad inventory on linear television, but then you add in all of the digital properties where this content gets shown live and streamed, or like recaps on YouTube. There's a ton of ad inventory for advertisers. So I think all around the Olympics are a real boon for the advertising industry.
So it's really interesting to bring streaming in. So linear is still huge, but streaming is important. Man Chung, I wonder, in a region where we're talking about time differences, always an issue, through the many years, many Olympics past, becoming less and less of an issue as we have all these opportunities to stream content. I mean, I was still streaming content and it was in my time zone. Did you see, or have you seen, maybe for the past several Olympic Games, although not the last one because that was in your time zone or in the Asia time zone, is streaming a real boon for broadcasters in order to get people to watch the content that otherwise in the past years they might have just missed because it was on an awkward time?
Yeah, I think the time difference still makes a difference. I think that, given that this Paris Olympic, there's a time difference of, I think, like 6 or 9 hours, right, between Paris and China, for example. So I think even with streaming, a lot of people still prefer to watch it on television. It's sort of like seen as a communal experience, right, between family members and friends. You watch it at a bar or whatnot. And a lot of these rights are still sort of held by these major broadcasters. For example, in China, it's held by CCTV. And so they have some sort of like symbiotic relationship with streaming services like Alibaba's Youku and Tencent Video. But I think majority of the people still kind of like watch it on CCTV, on the linear television. But of course, the younger generations, they prefer these digital services or even short video apps as well for the recaps or highlights.
Yeah. So in terms of like the broadcasters, Karina, I think in the UK, it's a really interesting dynamic we've got going on. So I think it's by law, right, that the BBC has to have access to a certain amount or has to be given a certain amount of broadcast rights. But Discovery muscling in and taking, they showed everything, whereas the BBC could only ever show 2 live events at the same time.
So the deal was that I think it's 200 hours of the Olympic Summer Games had to be screened on free-to-air TV. That didn't necessarily have to be the BBC, but Discovery signed a deal with the BBC for them to be the broadcaster that was going to have those rights. So they have been kind of working together. I think the first Tokyo Olympics was the first time that it was like this for people in the UK. Previously, a lot of the coverage was on BBC and it was free to air. And there was a bit of a backlash at the Tokyo Olympics. But what's interesting is the difference between the Paris Olympics. And I think it's interesting because it's probably broadcast rights and time zone to an extent. So sign-ups for Paris 2024, Discovery Plus and Max signed up more paid streaming subscribers in the first 4 days of Paris than the entire Tokyo Games. And over the whole tournament, there was 77% more signups in Paris than in Tokyo. So I imagine some of that might be down to the time difference because people like watching sport live. But I think also it suggests that there has been a bit of a shift in kind of consumer attitudes towards paid streaming. And I think something that originally they were kind of quite offended by, they're starting to find more acceptable now. The BBC did have still quite a lot of content, and it had some record-breaking stats on BBC Sport. And I think across the 19 days of competition on BBC TV, 36.1 million viewers watched 15 minutes or more. So that's almost 60% of the UK population. So the BBC has also had pretty good viewing stats from this year's games.
Yeah, I think the comparisons to Tokyo are really startling, actually. I think in Canada, so obviously Tokyo was impacted by the pandemic, got pushed back a year. There was nobody in the crowd. But the stats that I'm hearing from Canada, in terms of digital streaming, the number of hours streamed was up 170%. So Paris is 170% greater than the Tokyo games. So there's the time zone had an effect, but I think the availability of content on digital streams has really, increased the viewership patterns. Like I was sitting in the backyard having dinner with one of my kids, and she was streaming on her phone the surfing competition. And I didn't even know surfing was in the Olympics, but I said, hey, that's pretty cool. There's something for everybody.
Yeah, I must say, I signed up to the Discovery Plus $3.99 deal, and I ended up watching a lot more than I have in previous games because you could just watch whatever.
Have you churned?
Have I churned? No, you know what? Because I'm on the $3.99 deal, I've thought, okay, actually, I'll just keep that and I'll see what other content is in there because.
Okay.
Yeah. So actually, I haven't churned yet. I might churn at the end of the year.
Okay.
But for now, $3.99 for a month of content is not that much, is it really? So.
Yeah, no, good point. In terms of these other platforms carrying a lot of the broadcast, and I'm coming at this from a UK angle again, as I often do, based in the UK as I am. Karina, you mentioned it used to be everything was BBC. Obviously, no ad opportunity at all on BBC coverage in the country. But now, Discovery carrying advertising, this must be a bit of a boon for marketers, right?
Absolutely, but I think that streaming services need to be careful not to overload their audiences with advertising, especially if, like in the UK, they've been used to having no adverts during their sporting events. So Discovery did have adverts, but as Kantar said, it rates highly because the ad breaks are very short. And so it wasn't too disruptive. So I think it's a big opportunity, but they need to be really mindful of kind of how many ads they're showing and how relevant they are to the audience.
What does it look like in Canada, Paul?
I think, one of the aspects that's lucrative, I think, for advertisers is the idea of presenting sponsors, right? So, each show, if it's a morning show, an afternoon show, or a primetime show, is presented by a particular sponsor. So in Canada, RBC, the Royal Bank of Canada, was a big presenting sponsor. Toyota was another. So big national advertisers. There's a lucrative aspect of being a presenting sponsor. So they're in front of everybody for a couple of weeks. In addition to the adverts that run along with the content, Ozempic was very, very visible in these, adverts, as well as something called Bet Rivers, which is a online sports gaming app. So these were blanketed across the televisions because it was a great opportunity to get those messages out.
Man Chung, anything to add for Asia on the marketing front?
Marketing front is a bit of a different story, but it's obviously like a big opportunity for a lot of Chinese brands who are, a little lesser known for Western audience, but it's an opportunity for them to showcase themselves marketing-wise across the globe. But I think the general narrative about Chinese companies that they can't really kind of find the storyline that kind of resonate with, other types of audiences around the globe. And that's just something that they haven't been able to master over the years. So sometimes you see, for example, like Chinese character on the sandwich board on the sideline, due to just sort of like things get, lost in translation. So yeah, if they could become better storytelling, then, it's the Olympics definitely a great platform for them to be in.
I think it's worth mentioning that another big winner from the Olympics has been TikTok. So TikTok says that it had 1.3 million posts about the Paris Olympics, which is a 1,800% rise compared to Tokyo. Some of that is the kind of surge in popularity of the platform itself, of course, but also its ad revenue surged by 25% in the week following the opening ceremony alone. And I think that's going to be really interesting to watch in future games because we already know that Gen Z are ditching TV and streaming to watch kind of social videos, and whether that will become a bigger thing for next year's games will be really interesting, I think.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think viewership patterns have definitely changed, especially with younger demographics. I found my patterns changing this year. If I heard about a particular performance or a gold medal or whatever, I would simply go to YouTube, search for it, and CBC would have, the broadcaster would have posted that sort of 8-minute video recapping the whole thing, available on demand. So I thought that was a really good way to consume content. If you're not sitting on your couch at the time of the performance, you can easily go get it, an hour later.
Yeah. I mean, listeners to the show will know how big a fan I am of TikTok. And I just found it personalizes these athletes. I mean, things were popping up on my feed all the time. There was a hugely viral thing. I can't remember who the athlete was, but he was walking around extolling the virtues of the chocolate muffins that were in the Olympic Village. So there's a huge brand opportunity right there. So yeah, anyway, really, really interesting discussion, folks. But it is time to move on now to our recap stats quiz. This is my favourite bit of the show. This is where we recap today's theme with a few loosely related stats questions. There's no prize. It's all about bragging rights. There are only 3 questions. They're multiple choice, so it's nice and quick. I'm going to ask each of you to slack me your answers, so there's no room for influence or anything like that. And with that, let's get on to the first question. And we'll start off by looking at medals. And yes, the US topped the medal table. Well done, USA. But if you were to rank countries based on medals per head of population, the US actually drops to 47th. Grenada tops that particular list. It achieved 2 bronze medals, which averaged out at 1 medal per 56,000 head of population. But who came dead last? I've got 3 options for you. Bahrain, China, or India? Okay, the answers are in, and I'll just share that Man Chung got that correct before I'd even given the options. So well done, Man Chung. You knew the answer to that one. That was a little bit of a gimme, I thought, anyway. I thought I'd start you with an easy one this week. Bahrain actually finishes 5th on the list. It did very well. It got 1 medal per 425,000 inhabitants. China finished 2nd on the medal table to the US. Obviously a massive population, which meant that it only finished 74th on the list. But of course, India, a very poor showing in terms of medals. Only 6 medals, 5 bronzes, 1 silver, so not even a gold. 1 medal per 234 million inhabitants. So all 3 of you get a point. Well done. So after round 1, it's a dead heat. 1-1. Well done. Let's make the second question a little bit harder. We'll talk about global viewership. The full extent of the Paris Olympic viewership stats are yet to be fully collated. The IOC expected over half the world's population to engage via broadcast or digital channels, but it likely won't beat the world record for the largest audience for an Olympic Games. This is as per the Guinness records. This was a TV audience. Who does that accolade go to? So which Olympics had the largest viewership across the 2 weeks? We have Athens, Beijing, or London. So Athens 2004, Beijing 2008, London 2012. Okay, so we have some different answers this time. That's good. This was less easy. Man Chung was very quick on the button again there. Let me go through the incorrect answers first of all. Athens 2004 is incorrect, although that was the record at the time. It pulled in 3.9 billion viewers, a huge amount of people. We'll jump forward a little bit further to London 2012. This also isn't correct. This was the most watched event in US TV history, though, according to Guinness records, with over 219 million US folks tuning in. But the correct answer is Beijing 2008. 4.7 billion people tuned in across the 2 weeks. That equated to around 70% of the world's population, 7 in 10 people. A remarkable figure. And he was quick on the button and he was right. And that was Man Chung. Well done. And so you surge into the lead now with 2 to 1 to the other two.
Yeah, I mean, just based on the population in Asia Pacific and the time difference,
That's just linear TV viewership, right, Bill?
That was just TV,
So I
according to Guinness, yeah.
Yeah, I think nowadays the total number is going to be that number will probably be similar, but it'll be splintered between digital and linear, obviously.
Indeed. Okay, our final question. Lots hanging on this. Let's talk about athlete value. So the Olympics used to be wholly amateur, but from the 1990s, I think it was actually 1988, the IOC decided to drop that requirement and professionals were then allowed to compete. So in the 90s onwards. As such, at this year's event, there were many very, very well-paid professional athletes competing in various events. But from which country does the richest athlete come from? And these figures are from Esquire Australia. So I'm going to ask you to think in Australian dollars just for a moment. So from which country does the richest athlete come from? We have Greece, Spain, or the US.
Annual salary, Bill, or wealth?
Value across the calendar year.
Okay.
These questions got progressively harder, I feel. Okay, if you had gone for Greece, which two of you did, you would have been incorrect. The fourth richest, according to Esquire, came from Greece, and that is a guy called Giannis Antetokounmpo. He is a basketball player from Greece, plies his trade in the NBA. Quite a lot on the list came from the NBA. He is apparently worth 101 million Australian dollars per year. I mentioned the NBA. A lot of them on that list were from the NBA. The second richest player was from the NBA, and he was from the US, LeBron James, worth 128 million Australian dollars. But the number one on the rich list actually came from Spain. Jon Rahm, who's a golf player, who's worth 210 million Australian dollars, apparently.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, Jon Rahm has, is now with the Live Tour, which is sort of a guaranteed salary as opposed to prize money. So that obviously factors in.
That's probably where it's coming from, indeed. What that does mean is that Karina has hauled Manchung back in to tie with 2 each. So it does allow me to give you the tie-break question, which I'm always happy about. So this is a free-form answer. It's just a number. The closest wins. The final numbers for Paris, as I mentioned earlier, is still being finalised. So how many athletes competed at the Tokyo Summer Olympics in 2021? This is, again, according to the IOC. So it's just a number. Give me a number. Again, slack me your answers.
I have no idea.
These are always a bit devilish. I do apologise. I will point out if you're wildly out, though. Paul, you've got away with it this time.
I'm really bad at guessing things like this.
Just have a go.
You're not going to give us any kind of reference.
Okay, I'll give you a reference. There are 206 teams competing across 339 different events, if that helps.
That doesn't help.
No, that doesn't help me at all.
I put in my answer. It's just pure guess. So
it's not a bad guess, Manchung. Unfortunately, Karina has guessed slightly better. So Manchung went for 5,000, Karina 7,000. Pretty good answers, actually. The actual answer is 11,420. So that's an awful lot of people, isn't it? It's a big Olympic village. But that gives us a winner. And that person this week is Karina. Well done, Karina.
Thanks very much, UK, for the win.
congrats.
Yeah, and as always, it's time to end the show, and we end it with a winner, which is just what I like. Congratulations again, Karina, and thank you for speaking with us today.
Thanks very much.
Manchung, commiserations. Second place, though, not bad. Great to have you on the show again.
Yeah, 3 losing streak right now, three episode losing streak. So
Next time.
I'll have to break it next time.
And Paul, thank you as ever for joining us.
Yep. Thanks, Bill.
And thanks to all of you for listening in today to Around the World, an eMarketer podcast. Tune in tomorrow for The Daily Show, hosted by Marcus. If you want to ask us any questions, you can, of course, email us at podcast@emarketer.com. I hope to see all of you next month for another edition of Behind the Numbers Around the World. I can't promise a gold medal performance, but we'll try. Bye for now.